Hi guys, welcome to the Cannabis Vegan. Before we start today's show, I thought we'd look back at the Medical Cannabis Bike Tour and look forward to the Cannabis Vegan Bike Tour coming soon. Enjoy, guys. Alright guys, this first one comes from us from 420intel.com. On December 4th, on Friday, patient engagement is good medicine and good public policy. This particular article caught my attention because I'm often in the dispensaries talking very heavily with the owners, the bud tenders, the dab stations, and the patients. And I'm always trying to really stress that we really need to have that patient engagement. If we want to set the benchmark for having safe, clean cannabis every single time, we really have to have that patient engagement. We have to go to the doctors. We have to go in front of our peers. We have to talk to people that we know that are in the dispensaries and really explain to them what cannabinoids are, what different receptors in our body are about. And this particular article caught my attention because it really shows what we can do. And I really want you guys to pay attention to this. Take notes. Really find what it is that you could do to help promote a better, clean, safe cannabis.
Leonard Kish coined the phrase that patient engagement is the blockbuster drug of the 21st century. I can't take credit for it. It came from Leonard Kish. And what research has shown is that if you had engaged patients, you're going to have better satisfaction, fewer medical errors, better care, all kinds of things. Better patients follow their regime of the treatment plan better if they're engaged, if they understand what's going on and they see the value to it. Patient engagement is a wonder drug for that reason, and especially in pain practice, because the patients can tell you, if you listen to what they tell you, you can learn so much about what's wrong, what to do, and how they can be helped. Public policy today demands patient engagement. For example, the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, which was created by the Affordable Care Act, is investing tons of money into patient-centered outcomes research that demands patient engagement. In fact, the patients have to be engaged from forming the research question all the way through disseminating results. You're also seeing places like the Institute of Medicine talking about patient engagement. You're seeing many policymakers and research institutes focusing on patient engagement, including the National Institutes of Health. When you submit a proposal now, you have to show how patients are engaged in your research. And hospital systems throughout the country are including patient engagement in their systems to improve care. If you Google shared decision aids, you'll find a wealth of resources on the internet, including many that are available in the public domain that you can take with you. For example, there are things like, should I have an MRI? And you look with the patient at what the advantages are, what the disadvantages are, so you're making a decision together. And that's so important. Patients need to understand what's going on. You get better understanding and better follow-through if you make the decisions together.
All right, moving on to later news. I found this article here about Speedweed's new telemedication appointments. Basically offers marijuana prescriptions without ever leaving your home. And that, to me, is very, very unique. And it definitely gives the abilities to do a lot more. Well, the company also themselves have investigated in doing more. And they've also came up with this other one now, too, which is the Easy Meds mobile app. And it basically offers the marijuana consultation without ever leaving your home as well. So you basically kind of have a doctor's knowledge that in my opinion doesn't really know the most amount about cannabis, but for most part does seem to know a little bit about it, but by far is not the most connoisseur doctor I've ever seen. But knowing that you can talk to somebody without going to just a website and not being able to communicate makes a lot of difference, because people are going to have many questions. But I don't really believe, in my opinion, that the doctors are professional enough in cannabis and have enough years in the strains, the illnesses, and what's best overall on how to administer these doses, rather it be through vaporization, topical, aromatherapy, or basically swallowing a half a gram to a quarter of a gram, or in some cases a gram of concentrated oils a day. So that's something to look forward to and to consider, you guys. So I encourage you guys to do much research on all of that. I also had a talk with somebody the other day about them smoking cannabis while they're pregnant. And the biggest thing I had to say to them is do not smoke cannabis on any time, no matter if you're pregnant or not. Vaporize, juice it, or eat it. That's basically the ways that I would promote the most concentrated, safest, and potent ways, whether you're pregnant or not. For more details on that, I would go to these articles and really gain your knowledge. But just beware that a lot of the knowledge on there is still up for debate and is changing very, very fast and very rapidly. So just know that what you see isn't necessarily the full final line. We're going to talk about cannabinoid. And when we talk about cannabinoids, we're going to go ahead and talk about the most specific one, which is CBD, cannabidiol. In the last year to 2 years, a lot of research has shown that CBD is very prominent for epilepsy and a host of, ADHD and just a variety of different things. But in my opinion, in my research and development, I have found that one component is not going to stand strong to every single case. And even in the cases that it is standing strong, I believe that it could be at a far higher soaring rate of potential of each compound with the other compound, specifically being Delta 9 THC. And when you're talking about THC specifically, delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, you really do got to have those compounds present, as well as CBGs, CBGV, CBDA, CBDV, THCA, THCF, and a few other compounds as well that I've found through my research. But in this particular article, it really does break down cannabidiol and the basics of it and what the research shows to date. What I really consider the most about a lot of this information is that it's dramatically changing, like I said, rapidly. So just know that when you find a lot of the research, aka the CBD, just know that there's a lot going on, and with a lot of variations coming out with so many different kids and adults and elderly being sick, it just goes to be very prominent that one compound, yes, is pretty prominent, but it doesn't show that it's the soaring 199.9% of that a possibility could be. So without further ado, let's go ahead and look at this. This is a very interesting look at what others are doing and how we're all really pushing the limits.
Until you have a child with epilepsy, and especially a severe epilepsy that can strike with no provocation, you can't really understand what my life is like.
Aiden, pedal, pedal, pedal.
How is it, Aiden?
Pedal, 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 buddy.
Be willing to do whatever you have to do to help your child.
Channel 7's Essex Porter spoke with a father who wants to make sure that any new rules won't keep his son from getting the medication that changed his life.
I also thought that medical cannabis was just a hoax. I was used Marine. I've never tried cannabis in my life.
Ryan Day is Hayden's father. He told the Senate's Healthcare Committee that his son's health was deteriorating before they tried that marijuana compound.
We all want to be understood. We all want people who can empathize with us. In this world, there are not that many that can.
Lawmakers were hit by critics from both sides today as they work to tighten controls on medical marijuana.
It's stressful, and it's tiring, and it's exhausting, and it never ends. But what other choices?
Good job, Hayden. Good job. There's my Hayden.
And as far as we know, there is the actual savior of us all. And this vegan cannabis plant is here. And we don't have to worry about what harm it's going to do. What we really have to worry about is how do we get it to everybody and everything. All right, guys, moving on with our next story. We're finding that a lot of situations are being solved through cannabis. Now, this particular story comes from us again through 420intel.com, and the marijuana and the ADHD subject grows and grows and grows. I have found so many studies on this overall, specifically talking about the Adderall. There has been so many deaths on Adderall as a non-basic sickness that people are getting, that they basically say that, hey, I have this, can I have this pill, or can I have this prescription? And, for a lot of the younger teens and a lot of 20-something-year-olds, they are getting into this. I want you guys to know that the vegan cannabis reality, or the cannabis vegan reality, really is the key to solving your problems. Don't ever turn to anything less than plants, because plants have everything you need. Okay? So the next time that you have a friend, make sure you please explain to them that cannabis does far beyond anything that anything else can do. And there is much more that we all can do. Okay, moving on, guys. This next topic is a big one for us all. This comes out of greenmedinfo.com. I'm really surprised that there hasn't been a whole lot of articles on this. The articles that I was able to find and some of the videos, honestly, you guys, there hasn't been much play on it. It hasn't been seen as much, and I personally haven't seen it. And if I'd have seen this a couple of years ago, I would have definitely been showing everybody this. So this is one of the newest ones that has came out not that long ago, obviously November 29th. And I was quite shocked to see what all was really going on, considering that I have a lot to do with almonds on a daily basis. So here we go. When we're talking about PPO, for those that don't understand a lot of what goes on in the shipping and growing and exportation and just gathering of our foods around the world, we don't really know what happens to them. And there's not much guidelines in America alone for this, why other countries do have their guidelines and do have this pretty much solved. Now, in order to not give you the long version of this, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Angela. She explains it best and has done a very good job.
Hello, I'm Angela Piper, creator of the Clean and Lean Revolution. Here's your question today. True or false? The use of the word raw on a label means that the product has not been cooked, heated, or otherwise treated with chemicals. In other words, raw means raw. Would you buy almonds if the label clearly stated, not really raw, fumigated with propylene oxide gas, a possible human carcinogen, for your protection? In 2007, legislation passed by the USDA stated that all almonds sold in retail stores that are grown in the U.S. must be pasteurized. Despite being pasteurized, these almonds are sold as raw almonds. In fact, over 99.9% of all almonds sold in retail establishments today are not really raw. This is the equivalent of labeling an item kosher when it's not, or using the word organic when only 70% of the ingredients are organic, which unfortunately is actually allowed. Consumers depend on labels to give them the facts, when in reality food manufacturers are stretching the truths. Natural, for instance, it's a marketing term. It doesn't mean anything in terms of the product that is being labeled. The reasoning behind the legislation requiring almond pasteurization was to address two isolated salmonella cases that occurred in 2001 and 2004. The California Almond Board backed the law. California grows the majority of almonds that are harvested in the U.S. Now think about this. Two isolated cases were used to override the past decades of proven safety to the degree that legislation was enacted to protect the public. One of the biggest brain teasers about the last 7 years of almond regulation is this. Growers from the U.S. ship unpasteurized raw almonds outside of the U.S. without any need to gas pasteurize or steam pasteurize them. These products are clearly labeled unpasteurized raw almonds because the rest of the world insists on clear, factual labeling. There are a couple of clauses built into the legislation, and pasteurized raw almonds can be sold in the U.S. by retailers as long as they're not grown in the U.S. Another exemption was given to the U.S. almond growers to sell raw, unpasteurized almonds directly to consumers through farmers markets, as long as this doesn't exceed 100 pounds per person per day. We have to then assume that public health was not the reason that the legislation was passed. I mean, does this mean that we don't care about the health of the rest of the world, or the health of the people who frequent farmers markets? Some people have raised the concern that this has more to do with price fixing, spurred by the California Almond Board, than it does a health mandate. Why is pasteurization an issue? Because it happens in two ways. The first is the use of steam to sanitize the almonds, bringing the surface temperature up to 200 degrees, literally cooking the surface of the almond. And between you and me, when I buy raw almonds, I don't expect that they've been cooked. The second way they pasteurize is with a chemical called PPO, propylene oxide gas. PPO is how most almonds are pasteurized since it is cheaper than the steam method. PPO, however, is labeled a possible carcinogen by the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. So here's a summary on propylene oxide from the EPA's website, and please stay with me because this is important. This is a product that is being used on our food. Propylene oxide is used in the production of polyethers, the primary component of polyurethane foam, and propylene glycol. Acute or short-term exposure to humans and animals to propylene oxide has caused eye and respiratory tract irritation, Dermal contact, even with a dilute solution, has caused skin irritation and necrosis in humans. Propylene oxide is also a mild central nervous system depressant in humans. Inflammatory lesions of the nasal cavity, trachea, and lungs, and neurological effects have been observed in animals chronically, long-term, when exposed to propylene oxide by inhalation. Propylene oxide has been observed to cause tumors at or near the site of administration in rodents, causing stomach tumors and nasal tumors after inhalation exposure. EPA has classified propylene oxide as a group B2 probable human carcinogen. So just a quick rundown again on its uses. The major use of propylene oxide is in the production of polyethers, the primary component of polyurethane foams, and propylene glycol. Propylene oxide is also used in the fumigation of foodstuffs, the almonds that we're talking about, and the plastic medical instruments in the manufacture of dipropylene glycol and glycol ethers as herbicides, solvents, and in the preparation of lubricants, surfactants, and oil emulsifiers. This is what they're putting on our food. A product that decontaminates plastic medical instruments and is used as an herbicide is being used on your food that is being sold to you labeled as raw. Would you buy almonds if the label clearly stated not really raw, fumigated with propylene oxide gas for your protection? So the answer to today's question is false. A food produced in the United States may state that the product is raw when it really isn't. When you offer your child raw almond butter, you are likely offering your child pasteurized almond butter. And I want to make a note here that the use of propylene oxide gas is not allowed if the almonds are going to be sold as organic. So though the term organic is not always perfect, this is one more reason that choosing organic is a good idea. If you're looking for 100% raw, unpasteurized, organically grown almonds, your only option is to purchase from a grower at a local farmer's market or from a certified organic almond grower outside of the U.S. who exports almonds to this country.
Moving on in later topics, again, cannabis has the ability to help decrease obesity. With a lot of the laws being passed in Washington and Colorado and pretty much most everywhere it seems like nowadays, but not quite everywhere, we're finding that a lot of people these days are really starting to recognize that cannabis itself is one of the main components to help lose weight. Surprising enough that a lot of people are interested in knowing why. And a lot of other people are still skeptical about it, but still believe that there is a much possibility with it, considering that cannabis is a plant. And they pretty much think that plants are like salads, which is a good thing because for us vegans, we realize that there's a lot of power in, well, herbs, specifically anything green. And most people still are not too sure if they should even begin. I've had 3 friends tell me the other day they were not too sure about cannabis because they thought they would get, well, fat. And I had to explain to them why, and I had came across this article and showed them, and they were quite blown away. So I don't want you guys to miss out on something very specific.
If you look at the numbers across the country, they're still very much heading in the wrong direction. One of the things that people pay attention to, I think more than anything else, especially at the national level, has to do with the cost. And I think when you look at some of these numbers, Karen and John, these numbers are quite staggering in terms of what this costs overall. Like if you look at the cost of obesity overall, as things stand now, about $147 billion a year. You break that down specifically in childhood obesity, just per year, $14 billion associated with chronic disease associated with childhood obesity. What's projected to happen over the next 8 years, just in 8 years, not even a decade, $344 billion will be the cost of taking care of diseases associated with obesity, and specifically, if you want to break that down overall into healthcare expenditures as a country, almost a quarter, 21% of total medical costs used to treat these sort of diseases. $144 billion a year now. Just to give you some scale of reference, to take care of all cancers out there, the diagnosis and the treatment of cancers is about $104 billion. So this has surpassed that as things stand right now. People are paying attention. You're starting to see more incentives for people to stay healthier, both at the national and the state level. You are seeing about 3/4 of people who say they get the message. About 1/4 of people simply don't seem to respond at all. They're not changing their diet. They're not changing their activity levels at all based on all the messaging that's out there. Now, there are significant racial, ethnic, geographical differences that simply make it harder for people living in some areas of some backgrounds to try and get access to healthy foods and to places where they can be active. But still, I mean, think about that. 1/4 of all healthcare costs due to this somewhat preventable problem. Over the last year in healthcare reform, looking at some of the incentive programs, admittedly, that's going to take some time to actually see the effects of that. But one place that actually did decrease its obesity rates this year as compared to last year was Washington, D.C. And what was surprising to me when we talked to these folks was that some of the simplest measures seem to have an impact. For example, take a look at some of these things. Doing things like simply adding more bike lanes, creating wider walking paths, adding more parks. They had this big renovation project where they added more parks. They opened rec centers, free nutrition classes. It's amazing how high the health illiteracy rate is when it comes to nutrition specifically. And also in schools specifically, starting mandatory health classes. I don't know if you had health classes when you were in school, but mandatory health classes, mandatory physical ed classes, we know a lot of schools have cut those programs back. School lunch overhaul. I mean, so many school lunch programs simply did not help with the childhood obesity problems, and nutritional standards across the board have become stricter. So that, at least in D.C., seems to have made a difference if you sort of take that in aggregate. It's hard to assign any one of those things as the biggest sort of benefit, but you look at those things. They're not complicated things, and they've made a difference in a state, in a place, I should say, Washington, D.C., that had a significant problem.
I remember when I was in school, we had health class, but we never talked about nutrition. We ate fairly healthy. The school lunches were pretty healthy, and we just got outside a lot, and we didn't sit around on the couch playing video games.
Right.
And there were hardly any overweight kids in our school. I mean, look at you. You're a shining example. You just got to get out there and exercise, right?
You do have to exercise, there's no question. But I tell you, it's funny. My kids are in school now as well. I had a health class just like you, but they're actually learning how to cook. They're learning that food comes from the ground, not just from the grocery store. And I mean, a lot of people just simply don't get that message. Once you start getting simple messages like that at a pretty young age, you can see some of the benefits of that.
And I've never been a huge fan of, what people say, the nanny state or the government telling you how to eat. But if you look at what is in these processed foods, and most of the time that's the cheapest food out there, it's ridiculous. It's far more salt and far more fat than anybody should be consuming on a daily basis, and it's already in the can.
No question. And what's interesting is that when you talk about some of these racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic differences, going to McDonald's and feeding a family of 5 for $20, you get a lot of calories for $20. It's a pretty good bargain if you're living near the poverty line. So, it's the real question, trying to make healthier foods that we're talking about here cheaper instead of, simply getting rid of those foods. Trying to make those other foods more accessible. It's easier to get handguns in some places of Chicago, people tell me, than it is to get a fresh tomato.
All right, moving on. We have another huge topic that people ask me a lot about. They really want to know what they can do about cottonmouth. And I always tell them that there's a lot of different things they can do, but a lot of it has to do with the intake of their own nutrients. A lot of it is dehydration. You become dehydrated very easy no matter if you're on cannabis or not. And it really shows that people are very dehydrated most of the time, because usually when they have interaction with cannabis, they instantly get that dry mouth feeling. And I found it very interesting that, for a lot of people, the answers are out there. And I always explain to them a lot of it has to do with so many different things, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. But in this particular article, I encourage you guys to review it over and do your research as well. But there's definitely a lot going on there. And when you really see that most of the cannabinoid receptors throughout your body have a lot to do with how the homeostasis of your overall being is, you realize that having something as small as cottonmouth, dry mouth, it really isn't that bad. But, to narrow it down, right here, it basically says drink plenty of water, try to chew gum, which I don't agree with, especially any of that type of stuff, especially the sugar-free and all that, I mean, that's definitely, very, very bad for you anyways. So guys, once again, keep it cannabis vegan, baby. And mostly the sugar or milky drinks tend to make it that much more worse. So we all are realizing more and more that a lot of the keys to people's everyday issues are pretty much solvable. In fact, we know they're solvable. Here we go with another article. Caught my eye. 3 types of marijuana to hit Uruguayan pharmacies in 2016. I thought this was really fascinating because most of the world is really, really getting on board with what's happening. And to see Uruguay really moving forward really shows much promise for the rest of the world as well, guys. So much applause there. Cannabis Vegan moving forward.